Hello and welcome to China Global Television Network. This is The World Today. I'm Beatrice in Nairobi. Iran has warned the United States that any new military aggression against the country will provoke a more forceful and severe response. It follows a phone call between U.S. and Israeli leaders who discussed the possibility of renewing attacks. And Tehran are divided over conditions to end the war. The U.S. has reportedly outlined 5 conditions in response to Iran's peace proposal. They include the U.S. not paying any war reparations and Iran handing over 400 kilograms of enriched uranium to the U.S. Tehran calls the conditions maximalist, saying the U.S. has refused to offer any tangible concessions. Jim Spellman reports from Washington.
U.S. President Donald Trump spoke on the phone Sunday with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu in a call lasting more than half an hour. The two discussed the possibility of new military strikes against Iran as peace talks appear to have stalled. A short time after the call, Trump posted on social media, quote, "For Iran, the clock is ticking and they better get moving fast or there won't be anything left of them." And we're getting a rundown of where the two sides stands from Iran's semi-official Mehr news agency. They report Iran has set these issues as requirements for renewed negotiations. First, an end of the war on all fronts, including Lebanon, a lifting of U.S. sanctions, the release of frozen Iranian assets, compensation for war damages, and recognition of Iran's control of the Strait of Hormuz. Mehr reports the U.S. side responded by rejecting those proposals while demanding the transfer of enriched uranium from Iran to the U.S. and long-term restrictions on Iran's nuclear sector. How a deal would play out is also an issue. The U.S. wants a deal in place, including restrictions on Iran's nuclear program before permanently ending hostilities, while the Iranian side wants assurances they will not be attacked again before beginning discussions about the nuclear issue. Meantime, Iran has been engaging in diplomatic outreach. Iran's foreign minister spoke on the phone with his Qatari counterpart, and over the weekend, Pakistan's interior minister met with Iran's Speaker of the Parliament, Mohammad Bagher Ghalibaf, and other top officials in Tehran. Islamabad has been working to revive U.S.-Iran talks. Also, the UAE's only nuclear power plant was targeted by a drone strike Sunday. The attack set off a fire at the perimeter of the facility, but there are no reported injuries or radiation leaks. The UAE's defense ministry says the drones entered the country from the west and that the source of the strikes is being investigated. Small-scale attacks like these in the region have become common, raising concerns over the status of the fragile ceasefire. Jim Spellman, CGTN.
At least 5 people, including 2 children, have been killed in Israeli strikes across southern Lebanon. The latest attacks come despite Israel and Lebanon agreeing on Friday to extend their ceasefire by 45 days. 15 people have also been wounded in the attacks over the weekend. Additional strikes have hit eastern Lebanon, while Israeli reconnaissance drones were seen flying over Beirut and its suburbs. Hezbollah says it has launched a suicide drone attack on an Israeli military vehicle and struck a gathering of Israeli soldiers. Nearly 3,000 people have been killed in Lebanon by Israeli attacks since March the 2nd. At least 8 Palestinians have been killed in a new Israel attack on Gaza. Hamas military chief Izzi al-Din al-Haddad was killed in a strike on Gaza City on Friday. Hamas operations headquarters commander Baha Baroud was killed in an airstrike on Saturday. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says the operations are part of Israel's campaign against the leadership of Hamas. Indirect talks between Israel and Hamas remain deadlocked over a post-war plan for Gaza. 870 Palestinians have been killed in Israeli strikes since the October ceasefire, while 4 Israeli soldiers have been killed. Ten people have been killed in an armed attack in Mexico's Puebla state. Authorities say the victims include 6 men, 3 women and a child killed by unidentified armed individuals on a Sunday. Initial findings say 6 of the victims belong to the same family, while 4 others were workers. State and federal forces have launched an investigation to find the attackers and determine the motive. A magnitude 5.2 earthquake hit southern China's Guangxi Shuang Autonomous Region this morning. 2 people are confirmed dead. The last trapped person has been rescued and transferred to hospital. The China Earthquake Network Center says the quake struck Liunan district at a depth of 8 kilometers. Some buildings have collapsed. Emergency, fire and police authorities are carrying out search and rescue operations, resident evacuation and aftershock monitoring. More than 7,000 local residents have been relocated. A central work team has also been dispatched to guide on-site disaster relief. Basic public services, including communications, power and water, remain fully operational. To the Democratic Republic of Congo, where officials have declared another deadly Ebola outbreak in the northeastern Ituri province. The government says it is rolling out an emergency response plan alongside the World Health Organization, which has described this latest Ebola outbreak as a public health emergency of international concern. 2 cargo planes chartered by UN health and food agencies have landed in Bunia, delivering 10 tons of emergency medical supplies and nutritional aid. Over 300 suspected cases and at least 90 deaths have been reported, according to the Congolese Health Ministry. Thai authorities are investigating the deadly collision between a freight train and a public bus in central Bangkok. The crash happened on Saturday near Makasan station, killing at least 8 people and injuring more than 30. Thai government says support is being provided to survivors and victims' families as concerns grow over the dangers of railway crossings. Chawarat Yongiranon reports from Bangkok.
It is the day after the deadly collision between a freight train and a public bus in Bangkok. Traffic has returned to normal at the Makasan intersection where the accident took place. But the emotional scars remain for those who witnessed it. Surachit Inta, a motorcycle taxi driver who has worked at the intersection for many years, says he can still hear the desperate screams for help.
The warning alarm was ringing, but the barrier could not come down fully because the bus was in the way. Within seconds, the train rammed the bus and began dragging it. I ran after it to help people on the bus, but I couldn't help them because the bus was already on fire.
The fire was so severe that 6 of the 8 victims could not be immediately identified. Family members are now being asked to provide DNA samples to help confirm the identities of their loved ones. As many as 33 people were injured in the crash. After visiting victims still receiving treatment in hospital, Thai Prime Minister Anutin Chanvirakul says authorities must support survivors not only in recovering from their physical injuries, but also in coping with the psychological trauma caused by the tragedy.
No one is in a good state of mind because what they went through is considered sudden and violent. Everyone has trauma.
The Thai government's main priority now is ensuring that the investigation into the tragedy is carried out transparently, but also strengthening safety measures for commuters. Anutin acknowledged that achieving complete road safety would be a difficult challenge, saying the improvements would need to be implemented gradually, one step at a time.
We cannot allow this to continue. We need measures to reduce the number of rail crossings.
As the public waits for answers from the police investigation, the tragedy has reignited concerns over how Thailand can improve road safety and address long-standing public behavior on the roads.
Questions are being raised as to whether or not this accident could have been avoided, because it is clear that there are many factors that could have contributed to the collision. The barrier behind me failed to come down properly because vehicles were parked inside the yellow box where traffic was not supposed to stop in the first place. And at the same time, the freight train did not have enough distance to stop before the impact. This tragedy serves as a stark reminder that Thailand can no longer delay improving public transport safety. Chawarat Yongiranon, CGTN, Bangkok.
Russian President Vladimir Putin will pay a state visit to China from Tuesday to Wednesday at the invitation of Chinese President Xi Jinping. The 2 heads of state have sent congratulatory letters to the 10th China-Russia Expo, which is underway in northeast China's Harbin city. Our reporter Liu Xiajin has more from Harbin.
President Putin's visit comes at a critical time. Well, this year marks the 30th anniversary of China-Russia Comprehensive Strategic Cooperative Partnership, and both leaders have sent congratulatory letters to this 10th edition of China-Russia Expo, which is being held in Harbin from May the 17th to May the 21st. This expo covers all sectors from mineral resources, energy, green development, and low-carbon development, as well as electronics and people-to-people exchanges. Well, this year, this exhibition covers an area of over 55,000 square meters. But what I really want to show you here is this booth, where everything is made in Russia. Well, here we can spot all kinds of Russian goods, including Russian cooking oil, biscuits, cookies, Russian foods, all kinds of products and handmade items, as well as, instant noodles. Well, actually, two presidents have agreed that the year of 2026 to 2027 to be the China-Russia education year, where in this time, many activities will be held, including students exchange, teachers exchange, and joint research, and so much so forth. So earlier, my colleague have collected other, voices and sound bites from the vendors and participants here. Let's hear what they had to say.
For us, this year's China-Russia Expo is very significant. We are attending as members of the official government delegation. We also have a large business delegation accompanying us.
The custom clearance process makes it easier for entrepreneurs from both countries to learn from each other and boost the prosperity of our foreign economic and trade relations.
I came here specifically for the China-Russia Expo, and I'm really looking forward to it. Border clearance was very convenient, and the services were excellent. I hope to find more business opportunities and deepen cooperation through the Expo.
So the key is to boost the two countries' trade and people-to-people exchanges. Actually, China-Russia trade has remained strong despite this complex international situations. The bilateral trade has, reached over nearly $228 billion in the year of 2025, and China remains the largest trading partner of Russia for 16 years in a row. So that definitely echoed this year's theme of the Expo, which is trust, cooperation, and win-win.
That is it for this edition of The World Today. I'll be back shortly with more news from the continent in Africa Live. Thanks for watching. The DRC responds to another deadly Ebola outbreak, which the World Health Organization has declared a public health emergency of international concern. Kenya is brought to a standstill by a nationwide strike of transporters protesting high fuel prices. And in Nigeria, search and rescue efforts continue after gunmen abduct multiple students at 3 schools in the southwestern Oyo state. I'm Beatrice Marshall in Nairobi. Welcome to Africa Live. Also ahead on the program, President Museveni signs a controversial sovereignty bill into law despite opposition from economic stakeholders. And in your sports, Egypt continues its dominance of world squash as Mustafa Assal and teenage sensation Amina Orfi are crowned the world champions. We begin in the Democratic Republic of Congo, where officials have declared another deadly Ebola outbreak in the northeastern Ituri province. The government says it is rolling out an emergency response plan alongside the World Health Organization, which has called it a public health emergency of international concern. Now, according to the Health Ministry, over 300 suspected cases and at least 90 deaths have been reported. CGTN Sophia Shimechero reports.
2 cargo planes chartered by UN health and food agencies have landed in Bunia, a city in Ituri province in northeastern DRC. They are delivering 10 tons of emergency medical supplies and nutritional aid. The deployment follows a WHO declaration of the outbreak, which has also pushed into neighboring Uganda as a public health emergency of international concern.
What does this equipment consist of? First, infection prevention and control kits, namely aprons, gloves, masks and caps, so that healthcare workers in healthcare facilities do not become infected and do not themselves infect the population.
The rapid containment efforts are heavily concentrated in the epicenters of the outbreak.
The sites have already been chosen in Rwamparat and Mungwalu, and here in Bunia too. We brought all the tents to set up the treatment center. We know that the hospitals are already under strain because of the patients.
Authorities have now also confirmed a case in the Congolese capital, Kinshasa, a patient said to have traveled from Ituri, and the M23 rebel administration also confirmed a positive case in Goma with a patient believed to have traveled from Bunia. The DRC Health Ministry is urging people with typical symptoms to seek hospital treatment as soon as possible.
In fact, the sooner we treat the patients, the sooner we will cure them, and the sooner we will stop the spread of the virus. So this is not a mysterious illness. Make yourselves known so that we can treat you and prevent the disease from spreading.
Meanwhile, the WHO has urged countries bordering the DRC to enhance surveillance and report cases. Rwanda has already closed its border with the DRC in the western province of Rubavu. Sophia Shimechero, CGTN.
Well, the DRC has seen continuous Ebola outbreaks over the past 50 years. CGTN's Wilkista Nyabwa spoke to a virologist with the World Health Organization Africa about this vicious cycle of outbreaks.
The virus has now spread beyond the DRC, with 2 confirmed cases in neighboring Uganda. The latest Ebola outbreak is the 17th in the DRC since 1976, when it was first identified. Between 2018 and 2020, the WHO reported over 2,200 deaths in the most lethal Ebola outbreak in the DRC to date. Questions abound as to why the country continues to experience repeated cycles of the viral disease.
It's also related to the weak healthcare systems. For instance, in case of the DRC, we know that there's quite a limited infrastructure, and then as well as the underfunded facilities that delay the detection as well the isolation of the cases. All in all, this actually allows the outbreaks to expand rapidly.
Africa's second largest country has long been affected by armed violence, political instability and population displacement. These factors, healthcare analysts say, make the delivery of medical resources and quick management of a medical emergency difficult.
We know that where the outbreak is taking place at this point in time is in the eastern part of DRC. We know that's the area that is very, very, very prone to the violence, limiting the access to the affected population, as well as hindering the outbreak containment efforts.
The Africa Centers for Disease Control and Prevention has warned of a risk of further spread due to intense population movement. The WHO warns that there are currently no approved vaccines for the Bundibugyo strain of the Ebola virus and that the true scale of the number of cases is not yet clear. This is only the third time the Bundibugyo virus has been detected. Bulkisa Nyabwa, CGTN.
Well, here in Kenya, protesters have taken to the streets across several parts of the country, barricading roads and largely shutting down public transportation over recent fuel price hikes. On Thursday, the Energy and Petroleum Regulatory Authority announced a series of price surges in response to rising global oil prices triggered by the Middle East war, pushing diesel to a record high. This is the second consecutive month of price hikes, piling pressure on households and businesses along already struggling with high inflation costs.
We're asking the government to sort out the fuel prices. It's already hard for us to repay our car loans. I used to use at least Kenya shillings 2,000 a day for fuel, but now I end up using about 3,500 shillings, which leaves us with nothing at the end of the day.
Well, let's now cross over to Wilkista Nyabwa. She's joining us live from the streets of Nairobi, the capital. Wilkista, so how is the situation right now? And tell us the demands of the striking transport operators.
Thank you, Beatrice. Well, we are currently at a bus terminus just on the outskirts of the central business district. And under normal circumstances, this area would be buzzing with activity as vehicles left to get passengers and commuters to their destination. However, today you will see that there isn't much activity, and this has really been echoed across the city. We have seen across the city and as well across the country, as this is a nationwide strike. Earlier in the morning, we did see a number of commuters who were stranded for lack of vehicles to get them to their destination, walking to their destination. Others simply chose to stay away. A number of businesses closed today, a number of schools asking students and learners to stay away today as they would not be able to get to their destination. And in some areas, protesters have barricaded the streets, burning tires and simply preventing people, including those private motorists who are going about their business, from passing those routes and getting to their destination through those routes, basically saying that it was a day when nobody would be on the road in order to protest the fuel increment. And they do say that if they were to pass on the costs to the commuters, they would have to pass the cost to around 50%, increase the fares to about 50%, which of course commuters have said would be very high for them, would be difficult for them to meet. And therefore, for this reason, a number of them taking to the streets today, a number of them walking, fewer vehicles on the road, police presence in the central business district, and the strike has basically paralyzed transport in most parts of the country. Beatrice.
What is the response, Wilkista? What is the response of the authorities there? How have they been responding to the demands of the transporters and to the strike itself?
Well, this very day, the Treasury Cabinet Secretary has spoken about the strike. He did say that he did not think that it was necessary for the transport sector and everybody else, stakeholders and all the affected people, to protest, to go out to the streets to protest the fuel increment, as this was not due to the government's actions, but they say that it was due to the war in the Middle East and that it was beyond the borders of Kenya. However, people in the matatu sector, in the public transport sector here, they do point out that the government has raised a number of taxes, and they do say that those taxes have contributed to the rise of the fuel prices, and they do ask the government to go back to revise this, maybe to see how it can subsidize or address this issue, as the rise in fuel prices is likely to lead to a corresponding rise in other items, not just in transport and transport costs, and therefore it is likely to trickle down to the public in many different ways apart from just transport. Beatrice.
Well, Wilkista, it is the first day of the strike. How long is this expected to go on?
Well, the stakeholders in the public transport sector have said that they are willing to down their tools and to remain on strike for as long as it will take for the government to address their concerns and to also come up with a workable solution that would enable them to go about their business, to earn a living, to make a profit, and also to ensure that commuters get to their destination in a very affordable and acceptable way. So they have said that they are willing to be on strike for as long as that will take, and we will be monitoring to see how long that will take, whether they will come to some sort of agreement as they protest, as they remain on the street, as they air their grievances. Beatrice.
Well, talk to us about the expected impact of this, given that the public transport in Kenya is such a huge sector. What is the impact?
Well, the impact is likely to be great, given that the public transport sector, basically, it moves the whole country. More people depend on the public transport than those who have private vehicles. Private motorists are definitely outnumbered by those who need public transport. And this is not just a short distance. It also means in this particular area we are, some of these vehicles are those that are going long distance, meaning they're leaving Nairobi and going hundreds of kilometers. Hundreds of people, even those with private means, depend on these vehicles to move them, and therefore it would have a massive impact. Already the impact is being felt. Today, for example, a number of schools have told learners that they would not be able to go to school, they would not be able to access, and therefore it is people at work, business people, basically the whole country depending on this sector to keep them moving. And it's not just them who are affected, because this definitely affects private motorists as well, who also have been affected today by the roads that have been barricaded. And therefore it basically just means the whole country is almost at a standstill, given that where those who have vehicles cannot get past the roads that have been barricaded. So it just trickles across the country. Everybody is affected in one way or another, Beatrice.
Right.
And it also, of course, affects the goods and items that have to be moved across the country, some going outside the country, the vehicles and the trailers that take goods outside the country into Kampala, into Uganda, and into neighboring countries. So it basically affects everyone. Everyone is affected today, Beatrice.
Well, Kisa Nyabwa joining us there from the streets of Nairobi. Thank you. Well, let's now turn to Nigeria. Fear and uncertainty continue to grip residents in southwestern Oyo State after gunmen killed a school official and abducted several students and a vice principal in coordinated attacks on 3 schools in Orire local government area. Now, the exact number of abductees remains unclear. And following the Friday incident, authorities have ordered the temporary closure of schools in the area and nearby districts. CGTN's Caroline B. reports.
Communities in Oyo State are in mourning following an attack in the early hours of Friday when gunmen riding motorcycles stormed the Baptist Nursery and Primary School in Yawota, as well as the Community Grammar School and LA Primary School. The attackers abducted an unspecified number of pupils and school officials, including a vice principal, and shot dead an assistant headmaster. The vice principal's husband says he received the devastating news while at work.
I was on my duty post.
I was on duty in the university where I teach when I received the call. She left home before me and came to work like every other person, but she didn't return.
One parent recounts the chaos that erupted as the gunmen, dressed in military-style uniforms, opened fire near the schools.
Their clothes looked like army uniforms. We heard gunshots as they headed toward the school. We all ran into the forest and walked for miles. I've never walked such a distance in my life. I just came out of the hospital because of that experience.
Grieving parents are pointing to poor telecommunications in the area as a major security challenge that left residents unable to call for help.
We need help with stable networks. Lack of stable networks contributed to us being attacked easily.
A day after the attack, the Inspector General of Police visited the affected communities, assuring residents that security agencies are intensifying efforts to safely rescue the victims.
Since yesterday, operatives have been trying their best, following them around. A lot of things they have been doing, what they have been able to achieve, I may not be able to say it openly here. So far, so good. effort is on to ensure that we bring the children back.
The latest abductions have heightened security concerns in Oyo State's bordering communities. Earlier this year, 5 National Park Service officers were killed in another bandit attack in the Orire local government area. Authorities suspect the attacks may be linked to armed groups operating across the neighboring Niger and Kwara states. Caroline B., CGTN.
U.S. Defense Agency AFRICOM has said it carried out additional airstrikes against the ISIL militant group in northeastern Nigeria. Now, the strikes on Sunday were in coordination with the Nigerian forces. Neither of the sets of troops were harmed during the attack, according to AFRICOM. This follows another counter-terror operation on Saturday, where top ISIL commander Abu Bilal al-Miluki was killed with several of his lieutenants. The Trump administration deployed troops to support Nigerian forces fight extremist groups in the north, which has been facing an insurgency for over a decade. Let's now take a look at your business news. Here's what's coming up. Ugandan President Museveni signs a controversial sovereignty bill to law despite opposition from economic stakeholders. And Nigeria's housing crisis deepens as rising rents and soaring building costs push decent housing beyond the reach of most. Uganda's President Yoweri Museveni has signed into law a contentious measure aimed at curbing foreign influence in the country. The Protection of Sovereignty Act criminalizes promotion of the quote, interests of a foreigner against the interests of Uganda. It requires foreign agents to register and bans anyone working on behalf of foreign interests from developing or implementing policy without government approval. The law has been met with widespread criticism. The central bank governor, Michael Atingi-Igo, warned it could diminish financial flows into Uganda and risk running down foreign reserve exchange. The World Bank said it could expose to criminal liability a broad range of routine development activities. And Zimbabwe has begun formal talks to join the BRICS new development bank. The country's finance minister says they have received communication from the bank confirming the start of the accession process and the next steps towards full membership. The Southern African country says the talks reflect growing international confidence in the nation's economic reform program. In 2023, President Emmerson Mnangagwa announced that Zimbabwe had applied to join the multilateral financial institution established by BRICS members in 2015 to fund infrastructure and sustainable development. Nigeria's housing crisis has been deepening as rising rents, soaring building costs, and expensive mortgages push decent housing beyond the reach of many families. Stakeholders say the country will need more than 500,000 new homes built every year for the next decade to meet a growing demand. But for millions of Nigerians, even renting a modest apartment is becoming increasingly difficult.
After 6 years in his rented apartment, Barnabas David is now house hunting. His rent has almost doubled. Rising living costs and stagnant wages have made it impossible for him to renew his rent. He's now searching for a cheaper apartment his family can afford.
Everything has increased, but salary hasn't, and the work we do has not increased. It's really affecting me so much because the money is not always enough. Transportation, foodstuff, and so on has increased multiple times. Also, the rent has gone up. So most of the time, I don't always meet up my target of saving for my rent. That's my major challenge.
Across major cities like Abuja and Lagos, many middle and low-income earners are being forced to downgrade, relocate farther from city centers, or abandon plans of owning homes entirely. Experts say the problem goes beyond a shortage of houses. Inflation, high interest rates, and rising construction costs have made housing development more expensive. Since the removal of fuel subsidies in 2023, the cost of cement, transportation, and other building materials has surged sharply. Real estate developers say these rising costs are slowing construction and putting affordable housing projects out of reach.
Fuel affects everything automatically. The rise in the price of fuel affects cement, iron, even the labor, because transportation, everything in the Nigerian economy is constrained on fuel. So anytime fuel increase, automatically everything will increase. House rent, everything, food items, name it.
At the same time, land banking is driving up property prices in fast-growing areas. Economists warn that without urgent reforms, Nigeria's housing deficit could worsen as urban populations continue to grow rapidly. Mortgage rates, currently ranging between 20% and 30%, have also locked many Nigerians out of formal housing finance.
It is out of reach because you must have a decent job to be able to participate for a decent house. And at the same time, also the income grouping, the social stratification in Nigeria, the gap between the rich and the poor is so wide. And also it is semi-capitalist arrangement. All these are political factors and economic factors that do not allow citizens to participate or to own a house, particularly with the modern urbanization process.
Housing experts say solving the crisis will require major investments in affordable housing, cheaper financing options, improved urban planning and stronger regulation of land markets. But for families like David's, the challenge is immediate, finding a safe and affordable place to live in an economy where incomes are struggling to keep pace with rising costs. Kelechi Amekalam, CGTN, Abuja, Nigeria.
Stock markets in Nairobi, Abidjan, Lagos and Cairo have delivered returns that beat the three main American indices so far in 2026. But it is still easier for most retail investors in those African countries to buy cryptocurrencies than to invest in each other's capital markets. At the 2026 edition of the African CEO Forum in Kigali, CGTN's Ramanyang explored how one firm is working to make it easier for African retail investors to invest in Africa. This is part of that conversation with BOM3 Junior CEO and co-founder of Daba Finance.
What are the technical challenges in getting other jurisdictions? Because the advantage of operating in West Africa, right, is that you have a lot of common systems in place.
Correct.
Right? Same currency, same regulator, same stock market. Advantages that other parts of the continent really don't have.
Exactly.
Right? If you want to get into East Africa, you're dealing with the Kenyan regulator, the Tanzanian regulator, the Rwandan regulator. Right? There's a lot of bifurcation that happens along the way.
Correct.
Does that slow down your ability to onboard clients from these other parts of the continent who want exposure to West African assets?
The beauty of what we've done, and comparatively to other fintechs, you could say that we went slower. But we went slower intentionally because we wanted to build the right technology and the right framework to then scale, something that's scalable across the continent. So technically today with our platform, we can unlock and open a new market in a month.
How do you keep costs under control? Because one of the things that I keep hearing, at least from retail investors, is that the cost of trading, right, tends to be
very high.
It's very high, right? Broker commissions, etc., cost of mobile money. The instant you've made a transaction, you're buying $100 worth of stock, right? Your transaction fee is going to be like 3-6% of that, right?
Yes.
It's relatively high.
Yes.
Can you scale and still keep that low?
Actually, with scale, we can bring that lower. So we had to make a choice when we started, right, is what do you optimize for, right? We optimized for access. And now that we've, in the market that we're operating in, we are now the leading platform for any retail investor of any sort to access that platform. Now we can talk about bringing down the cost for deposit, the cost for trading, the costs for maintaining and managing your portfolio, right? That is something that we're now optimizing. And with scale, we'll be able to bring that cost down even as we go into other markets.
And just looking at the performance of indices like, the BRVM, the Nigerian stock market.
They've been, yes.
I mean, the Nigerian stock market is up 40-50%, and that's just this year.
Yeah.
Right? Is there a lot of attention going into the Nigerian market?
Yes, of course, with the upcoming Dangote IPO as well, it's brought a lot of kind of like attention into the market. We are looking into that market as well, just because we are very demand driven. Our customers come onto the platform, they trade what we have available, and then they tell us, hey, we would love to go here. And given that our technology is modular, is plug and play, we can now say, okay, there is a lot of demand or sufficient demand for this new geography. Hence, we then go and try to engage with the local stakeholders to go into these different markets. The BRVM, for example, for the last 2 years has outperformed the S&P 500 on an FX-adjusted basis.
But going back to the Dangote IPO, I mean, that opened, because the way that's going to be structured, right? The idea, at least based on what I've heard from him, is he wants to make this a Pan-African offering. Right. I mean, that creates an interesting opportunity for you at DABA, doesn't it?
Right. Absolutely. We would love to be involved with the transaction. There is not much that we can kind of like filter through right now until the prospectus is officially announced. But if we can access it, we can guarantee you that we will offer that opportunity if we can access it. I think one thing that is very interesting about this transaction is that given the household name that Dangote is, it will bring a whole new crop of investors. I forget the exact company in India that IPO'd right around I think it was in the 90s or early 2000s, and it had the similar effect on their stock market, whereby Indians were now involved in stock trading thanks to that blockbuster IPO in their market. And that is what Dangote can do for Africa globally. Obviously, Nigerians in priority because it will be Nigerian listed. But again, they've had multiple consultative meetings with different exchanges talking about a continental Pan-African listing. I do not have any exclusive information as to how far they have gone in those exchanges, but it will be great because if a cross-listing can be done efficiently, it will also draw more investors in those different markets where the stock will be listed.
One last question for you with respect to where you are in terms of the business at the moment. You've got 200,000 investors on the platform at the moment. You already have built the foundational systems. Those are in place. Are you looking for any capital to scale further into, because as you said, you have your base in West Africa right now, considering getting into the East African market.
Correct.
Africa is massive. There's a lot of capital out there that's looking for a place to be parked.
Right.
And it's not going to go into land.
Right.
It's not going to go into real estate.
Right.
It needs to find a home in bonds, in equities around the continent.
Right.
Do you need capital to get to that end?
Absolutely. I mean, we've built pretty amazing technology that allows us to bring access to the African capital market, but that technology needs capital to be maintained and to be scaled. So we are open to opportunistic capital that understands the mission that we stand behind, because not all capital is good capital.
Chinese officials have released data on the country's economic performance for April and the first 4 months of 2026. Our reporter Zhou Yixin has this report.
At the press conference, officials say China's economy has shown steady growth in the first 4 months of this year. They especially highlighted great momentum in advanced manufacturing, high-tech, and foreign trade. And here are some of the key highlights. In the first 4 months of this year, China's industrial output grew by 5.6% year-on-year, and manufacturing remained a key driver, especially equipment manufacturing and high-tech industries. Emerging industries have also saw a strong growth. Output of products like 3D printing machines, industrial robots, and also lithium batteries have all increased rapidly. While second, the service sector continued to expand, especially information services, business services, and also finance. While third, consumer spending kept recovering. Service consumption grew faster than goods consumption, especially in areas like transportation, tourism, and other entertainment-related areas. While also fourth, China's foreign trade remained resilient despite external uncertainties. In the first 4 months of this year, total imports and exports rose nearly 15%. And while trade with Belt and Road partner countries have also seen steady growth. Lastly, fixed asset investment have declined, but investment in high-tech and advanced manufacturing have grown very fast. And officials say that reflects China's continued push toward high-quality development. And overall, they say China's economy maintained stable growth, while challenges including uncertainties of external environment and also a not too strong domestic demand still remain.
Now, if central banking terms like quantitative easing make your head spin, get ready for trimmed mean inflation. The incoming U.S. Federal Reserve Chair has promised a change in the bank's monetary policy aimed at controlling inflation and maximizing employment. But if Kevin Walsh has pledged to uphold the Fed's tradition of staying out of politics, his inflation strategy is politically charged for some, as Owen Fairclough explains.
The U.S. central bank is undergoing a nearly $2.5 billion renovation. But there are arguably more profound changes underway at the Federal Reserve as outgoing Chair Jerome Powell is replaced by current Governor and board member Kevin Walsh, who wants to shake things up.
That means a regime change in the conduct of policy.
And that includes how the Fed tackles inflation by raising or lowering the interest rate that influences most types of borrowing, from a mortgage to growing a business.
What I'm most interested in is what's the underlying inflation rate. Not what's the one-time change in prices because of a change in geopolitics or a change in beef, but what's the underlying generalized change in prices in the economy.
But that's tricky. For Walsh, that means eliminating prices with the biggest swings. He mentioned beef because a shortage of it has caused the price to shoot up over the past year or so. Another one is energy. Just consider what a single event, the Iran conflict, has done for global oil and gas prices. And yet the Fed under Powell already eliminated both food and energy for its preferred measure of inflation. And Walsh's critics say that his preferred measure, known as trimmed mean inflation, typically finds it's lower than those other measures. And that just happens to help Walsh's case for cutting that main interest rate and aligns with President Donald Trump's view. Trump condemned Powell with personal insults for keeping that rate high, which Powell and his board did over concerns that any reduction would reignite inflation at the expense of potential economic growth that might benefit Trump politically. And another change Walsh plans to make: talk less.
Good afternoon.
Powell held regular news conferences to explain why the board raised or lowered that rate and where he thought the economy was headed to signpost his next move, with the aim of keeping stock markets calm rather than panic investors with an unexpected decision. But Walsh thinks this doesn't always help, especially as the Fed has lately indicated it'll cut that rate only to back off, fearing this would accelerate already rising inflation from the Iran conflict.
The Fed tells the whole world what their dots are going to be, what their forecasts are going to be. If the Fed were to wait until it gets into a meeting before making a decision, that incremental deliberation can keep the central bank from compounding its errors.
But if Walsh plans to communicate less, he may also have to tune out the man who nominated him.
We're going to have somebody very good. Interest rates should come down very substantially, I think.
The new chair has pledged to uphold the Fed's commitment to work independently of politics and politicians, even the president. Owen Fairclough, CGTN, Washington.
And let's now take a look at your sports news. Here's what's ahead. Egypt continues its dominance of world squash as Mustafa Asal and teenage sensation Amina Orfi are crowned world champions.
How would you create your legend? On the fields, on the tracks, in the arenas of Africa. Were you born to be a player? Could this moment be yours?